Hello, my name's Catherine Pizzuto. I'm a library and information science student at the University at Buffalo. This is my presentation, Using Universal Design. Today, I wanted to focus on the principles and concepts of universal design and how to use this design principle in an everyday school or library setting. What is universal design? This concept began to evolve in the 1950s in Japan, Europe, and the US. Universal design started as an architectural principle to remove the barriers from buildings' constructions for people with disabilities. This included requirements for wheelchair-accessible ramps and new designs for doors, bathrooms, among other spaces. This all came to light because of the American Disabilities Act. This also caused architects to think more about designing the building's construction in different ways that are more accessible to people. This design principle has evolved from an architectural concept to education and library design. I wanted to start this presentation off talking about the 7 universal design principles. The first of which is equitable use, which is making designs that are marketable to people of a diverse pool of abilities. Next is flexibility. This helps with a design to have a wide range of options. For example, if someone who is blind wants a book at the library, they have the option of a Braille book, audiobooks, ebooks, and audible alternative text. Along with simple and intuitive use, make sure the design is easy to use regardless of the user's prior knowledge. Next is perceptual information. The design successfully communicates effectively even with ambient conditions and the user's sensory abilities. This can include closed captioning options on a presentation. Next is tolerance of error, which happens all the time. This helps with minimizing unintended actions, such as accidentally making a wrong selection at self-checkout and having the ability to delete the item. Next is low physical effort. This design helps with people's comfort, so doors can open easy and items are reachable and accessible. Lastly, size and space is having appropriate spaces for people regardless of someone's body size, posture, or mobility. What are the benefits of universal design? Universal design has made life helpful for all people. This concept helps designers think about people beyond a neurotypical person. Let's take the automatic door. Has it found you any help in the past? The answer is probably yes. This is a design for people who needs help with mobility into a building. But it can also help a delivery man with packages, students with lots of books, pregnant women, families, and the elderly. Universal design has a purpose for a variety of reasons that go beyond its intended purpose. Universal design has made its way into learning environments, which is extended into concepts such as universal design learning. According to the Higher Educational Opportunity Act, it defines universal design learning's framework that provides flexibility in ways information is presented, in the ways students respond or demonstrate knowledge. Learning supports learning via effective networks. It also reduces barriers in instruction, provides appropriate accommodations, supports, and challenges, and also maintains high achievement expectations for all students with disabilities and students who are limited English proficient. The design problem. As designers, how can we possibly create something with each individual stakeholder in mind? At first glance, this seems like an impossible task to me. Every person has their own individuality and ways of thinking and processing information. But I believe that the solution starts with the problem, by exploring everyone's uniqueness. The universal theory displays concepts that help explore individuality and learning style. This could mean getting to know your students by talking and reading their disability profile. It could also mean making sure to use ideas of the stakeholders in a case study. The National Center of Universal Design for Learning provides their own principles of universal design. Their three main principles are: 1. Representation. This means giving multiple options, such as a library having multiple formats for a book. Principle 2. Action and expression. Giving someone the ability to feel comfortable to explore their needs and wants. Principle 3. Engagement. Provide different ways to engage, such as taking the classroom outside or putting on a play when reading a book. These principles also support and connect to the original universal principles, such as providing multiple means of representation. It also prompts flexibility and perceptible information. Now, let's talk about the process of universal design. The first thing you need to do is identify the application. What type of product or environment will the design be in? The next thing to do is define the universe. That seems like a large task, but this means describe the users using the service. Then describe their characteristics, such as age, gender, learning style, and abilities with mobility and communication. Then, involve the consumers, asking stakeholders their thoughts and ideas. I have heard this one a lot, and it must be important. When I need assistance with a program or have trouble coming up with ideas, the best solution is asking the people in the program. They have the best ideas and have a sense of pride because they are involved in the process. The next thing to do is adopt guidelines and standards. This is to integrate the best practices with a set of guidelines. The next step is to apply guidelines and standards. Apply the practices of universal design to real life. Next, plan for accommodations, and I think this should be before applying the guidelines. Be prepared for requests with assistive technology or an interpreter. Next is to train and support. It is best practice to have resources posted of important questions and helpful hints to your coworkers to keep everyone like-minded. Next, evaluate periodically. Check on how the design is working with users and make modifications from those evaluations. What does universal design look like in a classroom? I've used this topic in my own professional experience while working with people with disabilities. Classroom climate maintains the values and expectations. This starts with a statement in the syllabus of what type of accommodations are offered and other learning needs. Also encourage interactions with students. Make sure they can feel comfortable communicating their needs. Also encourage students to communicate and assist one another. Make sure the classroom or environment has appropriate equipment and resources to encourage learning without barriers. This can include having enough space to move around with a person in a wheelchair. It is not realistic to have all accommodations at once. It is important to talk to the stakeholder and design a classroom environment that will work for them based off of their own personal preferences. Delivery methods. When teaching, use multiple accessible instructional methods that are accessible to all learners. This keeps students engaged and motivates additional learning. Some methods can include hands-on activities, fieldwork, and educational software. Next, utilize resources and technology. Make sure the materials used in the classroom have alternative formats and accommodate multiple types of learners. I often utilize the read out loud option on a PDF. Giving feedback on a regular basis will help with higher educational achievements. For example, giving feedback on a project before it's due. In my experience, this can be sensitive for students with disabilities, or anyone really. Giving too much critique can be discouraging, but having a balance will encourage lots of positive feedback as well. Next, assessment. Assess how you're doing. Say the student's working on a computer program, but they're still having trouble. See if there's any changes that can make their learning experience better. Lastly, accommodations. Learn about the school's accommodations and resources that are available to the stakeholder in order to ensure that they have all the opportunities they need. Next, I wanted to talk about the individual perceptual fingerprint. We all think of sensory as hear, taste, smell, and touch. These are all the mechanics to help humans live and evolve in the world. Each person has a variety of abilities in each of these mechanisms, such as someone with a sensory processing disorder does not interpret the same pitch and words to a song as someone who has perfect pitch. Which leads me to the second proponent to perception, is understanding and interpreting senses. Ever try to explain something to someone and they are just not understanding it at all? It's best practice to think of an alternative way to teach them. Lastly, what does your sensory experience mean to you? We all have different perceptions because of culture, experiences, and memory. This reminds me of smelling something and having all the memories come rushing back. To someone else, that same smell might be a new experience. These are all ideas to think about when exploring stakeholders' characteristics and learning style. To conclude my presentation, I wanted to talk about 3 key takeaways. The first one is communicate and collaborate, which is a big part of design, especially in universal design. It is important to learn about the stakeholders and see what their wants and needs are. Next, treat people as individuals. Each person has their own unique abilities and perceptions. Lastly, trial and error. What works for one group or classroom will not work for the next. It's always good to stop and reevaluate and try new solutions. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on universal design.